Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. 2 firefighters were recently arrested and detained by federal immigration officials while on assignment to fight the Bear Gulch fire. Many wildland firefighters believe the men were essentially set up and handed over to the feds by their management team. We'll talk with State Line reporter Alex Brown in a minute, but first, let's get you caught up. Seattle City Council members will vote on whether to expand the closed-circuit television camera pilot. The program started in late 2024 in the CID, downtown, and on Aurora Avenue. The cameras are intended to curtail human trafficking and gun crimes. Today's vote would expand the pilot to the Stadium District, Capitol Hill, and around Garfield High School. The meeting starts at 2 p.m. And in more City Council news, Friday is your last chance to say something about Seattle's comprehensive plan. That's the framework the city will use to guide growth over the next several years. You've got 2 opportunities, one at 9:30 in the morning and one at 3 p.m. The morning session will have a remote option, but you've got to be in person for the afternoon. We'll have more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now, but before we move on, you press play on this show every single day to learn something new about our city. We bring you up to date 11 times a week. This podcast is part of an entire newsroom of reporters, producers, and editors who work to keep you informed and hold local leaders to account. This week is KUOW's fall fundraising drive, and the elimination of federal funding means your financial support is extra important. So go to KUOW.org to donate today. And thanks. The largest wildfire in Washington state right now is still burning. The Bear Gulch fire is now estimated to be more than 10,000 acres in the Olympic National Forest. A couple of men who were fighting that fire were arrested and detained by federal immigration officials last month. Customs and Border Patrol says the 2 men are in the country illegally.
Certainly, this is a fairly unprecedented example of taking this immigration enforcement action to places it hasn't gone before.
That's Alex Brown, who covers the environment for State Line. He found that many firefighters who are familiar with the incident believe the management team overseeing the fire crews played a role in handing over the men to immigration authorities, that they essentially turned them in. He's here now to talk about it. Alex, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
So let's help listeners understand more about the August 27th immigration raid. What happened that day?
So these 2 crews, in the days leading up to the raid, had been assigned to very active roles, fighting the fire, securing the fire edge, suppression repair, protecting structures, things like that. So on the day of the raid, these 2 crews were told, you're getting reassigned, you're going to this staging area, you're going to cut firewood for the community. They were told they would be met there by a division supervisor, so the crews went to this area, found timber there, weren't sure if that's what they were supposed to cut. They waited. The division supervisor never showed up. After about an hour, unmarked law enforcement vehicles pulled up, started questioning the firefighters, and then started checking everyone's immigration status. And ultimately, 2 of those firefighters were arrested, and the rest of the crews were demobilized and sent home.
Okay, so sent to a location. Their supervisor did not show up, but Customs and Border Patrol did.
That's right.
Okay. What can you tell us about the men who were arrested?
We have heard from the attorneys for one of them. He came to the country when he was 4. He's been a firefighter for 3 years. According to his attorneys, was here on a U visa, kind of following all the necessary steps to secure permanent residency, so they feel he was detained illegally. I do believe we know both of them are Oregon residents who were with these firefighting contract companies based in Oregon, who had been assigned under contract to help fight this fire.
You reported that the wildland firefighters and other experts believe the management team overseeing the fire crews played a key role in handing over these firefighters to immigration authorities. Why do they believe that?
I've heard from a lot of folks in the wildfire world who are, familiar with how these operations work, raise a lot of questions about this management team, California Interagency Incident Management Team 7. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
These are management teams made up of federal, state, local personnel based in different areas of the country. And during wildfire season, for large fires, they kind of get assigned on rotation to oversee the response. So this team was assigned to oversee the response to this fire. The questions that are being raised are from firefighters who were there at the scene, felt it was very unusual that they got pulled off this very active role in fighting the fire, deployed to this staging area where they thought they were going to meet someone, and then they were ambushed. So talking to a firefighter who was there, he said he felt betrayed by the leadership team, felt that they were led into a trap. I've heard from many other wildfire veterans who have spent a lot of time on fires like these, who have been looking at the incident management teams, the prior deployment of these crews, and said this just doesn't add up. We don't know why these teams would have been sent to this area unless it was for the purposes of handing them over to immigration enforcement.
They were also pretty deep in the woods.
That's right. This was a very remote area. Wildfires are secure areas. There's barricades, checkpoints. So for Border Patrol to know where these teams were and to get access to that spot, a lot of people are asking whether this incident management team had a role in kind of helping set that up.
The arrest of these firefighters has sparked some outrage from our local political leaders here in Washington. Governor Bob Ferguson, Senator Patty Murray, who called Trump's immigration policy fundamentally sick. That's a quote from Murray. What does Customs and Border Protection have to say about the raid?
So the federal immigration authorities are saying this was kind of started by an investigation. They didn't specify exactly the nature of the investigation. We've since learned that this was allegedly an investigation into time card fraud or fraudulent billing. Federal immigration authorities say this was a Bureau of Land Management investigation. And as federal law enforcement conducted this investigation, they requested the help of Customs and Border Protection to kind of verify the rosters of these firefighters. So during this operation, they questioned, I believe, 44 members of these crews and ultimately arrested 2 who they claim were in the country illegally.
And what about the fire boss here?
Yeah, so the incident manager from Team 7, Tom Clemo, he is the deputy fire chief for Santa Monica, California. The city has put out a statement defending him. He claims he was given a tip about this alleged fraudulent billing, passed that along to federal law enforcement who conducted the investigation. He denies any involvement in the immigration operation.
What are the people you're talking with making of that explanation?
A lot of people who have spent a lot of time on fires like these are saying it doesn't add up, that it's very unprecedented for a law enforcement raid, let alone one involving immigration authorities, to show up over time card discrepancies, billing, whatever you want to call it. And
as you report, there's a longstanding agreement that immigration agents don't interfere with first responders.
That's right. It's long been a federal protocol that, first responders on the scene of an emergency don't get disrupted to be checked for immigration status. So a lot of people who are veterans in the wildfire world have said, this is really fairly unprecedented for this protocol to be broken, and really raises a lot of questions about, not only for wildfire season, but for other first responders, if they're now subject to being raided. And certainly in the wildfire world, where you have a lot of crews, many of people of color, some crews, people here on H-2B visas, if that suddenly makes them a target for immigration agents, where once wildfire kind of offered you, if not immunity, then assurance that you would be able to do your job without disruption, now making you potentially a target.
And, let's not forget about the Bear Gulch fire that is still burning. What kind of impact did these arrests have on the efforts to actually fight that fire?
Yeah, so this is another thing that came up. Federal immigration agents have said this did not disrupt the firefighting operation. I believe the incident management team said something similar. Talking to crew members and veterans in the wildfire world, they've said, these crews were indeed pulled off the fire. The statements really focused on the fact that they had been chopping wood that day or assigned to do that. But in the days leading up to that, they had a very active role in suppression and other activities. And so the fact that they were reassigned that day meant those 2 crews were off the fire line and were presumably replaced by crews who maybe weren't as familiar with the local hazards. And those crews were sent home early as well, demobilized. I know the federal government has said they canceled the contracts of those 2 crews. I've heard from folks in the contract world that's not the case. Those crews still have active contracts and are able to be redeployed. But a lot of veterans I talked to said it just doesn't add up that this would not have affected firefighting operations.
You've also done some reporting on federal government claims that the 2 men who were arrested were not actually firefighters. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so that was a claim put out by the Department of Homeland Security. They said these were not firefighters. These were crews that were in a support role cutting firewood. I think it's important to note these were both certified firefighting crews with qualifications, Type 2 wildland fire hand crews, one of them being an initial attack crew, which is a more advanced certification. In the days leading up to the raid, they'd been on a very active role in fire suppression, securing the fire line, doing these important jobs. So they're very much firefighters. I think the federal government has used the fact that they were reassigned on this particular day to a staging area to kind of diminish their role. And we've seen that claim get repeated by elected officials here in Washington. We've seen it repeated by media outlets who have just kind of taken that at face value. I've talked to a lot of firefighters who are very insulted and hurt, who have had similar roles on similar crews, really feeling devalued that we're not considered firefighters. One firefighter I talked to said it would be the equivalent of, going to a fire station and finding the crew members lifting weights and saying, "Oh, you're not firefighters. You're not fighting a fire right now." That's kind of how a lot of firefighters feel about that claim.
That is really interesting. What do you think that says that the government is diminishing their role here?
Well, I think it shows just how much backlash there has been, certainly from elected officials as well as from the public. People certainly value firefighters, especially when, our cities are inundated with smoke. We kind of understand the importance of the role they're serving, the sacrifices they make. And so it's certainly a tricky narrative, and combined with this precedent that immigration enforcement is not supposed to disrupt firefighters, I think this idea of claiming that they weren't firefighters because they were assigned to cut wood on that particular day just shows how much backlash is coming based on this incident.
And you kind of alluded to this, but, how does this show up for these wildland firefighters? There's a lot of trust and dependence in these crews. I'm sure they're tight with each other.
Yeah, I've heard from, folks who are still active in the wildfire world that they've heard from people who are still assigned to the Bear Gulch fire. This has really, demoralized the crews. A lot of them are very concerned. I think the larger question going forward is, as you mentioned, that loss of trust and what effect does that have, not only on if crews are trusting their own leadership, but if they think they might be subject to immigration raids. There are people who are concerned that this will affect which crews are willing or able to deploy, and if that affects capacity going forward.
Appreciate it. Alex Brown covers the environment for State Line. Thanks so much for your reporting.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.